Hey, I'm Dominic Waddles.
And I'm Mark Rosenblatt.
And this is the MDetroit podcast.
MDetroit podcast is an interview-based podcast about the artists, creators, and innovators of Detroit.
So now listen to what we have in store for you this week.
This week on the podcast, we have none other than the great guitarist, Sasha Kashperko. Dom, why don't you tell us a little bit about the podcast?
Yeah. So with Sasha, we talk about him coming to America and joining the great music scene that America has to offer, but also Detroit's music scene, which we really care about in today's time. Also, we talk about Anti-Philosophy with Deshaun Jones and learning how to craft your own sound.
So without further ado, please enjoy Sasha Kashperko.
Sasha Kashperko.
Yes.
Woo! Welcome to the MDetroit podcast.
Yeah.
It's an honor to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. Yeah.
And we're going to start this whole thing out by reading you your bio.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, yeah.
And then you're going to tell us what you would change.
Okay.
Or would add.
Or would add.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
So here we are. Sasha Kashperko is a Metro Detroit-based jazz guitarist and producer, originally from Belarus, who has worked with artists such as Robert Hurst, Common, Kareem Riggins, Robert Glasper, Music Soul Child,
Yes.
Marcus Miller, Brain McKnight. Did I just say Brain McKnight? Brian McKnight, Black Milk, and many others. His work has received international attention between releasing 11 projects under his name and working as a sideman on various projects with Grammy-winning artist Sasha. Has toured nationally and internationally with groups such as Mahogany Jones Live Ensemble, Nomadic, and the Chris Johnson Group. He is also seen frequently performing as a solo guitar and quartet leader on behalf of the Detroit Symphony Orchestra. You can catch Sasha frequently performing as a leader and sideman at all the historic jazz venues in Detroit, such as Cliff Bell's, Burt's, Baker's Keyboard Lounge, the Music Hall, the Jazz Cafe, Orchestra Hall, the Max Fisher, the Blue Llama, and many more.
Yes.
So
The only thing I would change is my country is pronounced Belarus. I think Belarus is actually another place, a city somewhere.
that sounds pretty...
Belarus is
Yeah,
the country
yes.
that I was born in.
Hilarious.
Okay.
A very new country.
Wait.
As of 91.
Yeah.
Yes. We used to be a state of the Soviet Union.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a bunch of those Eastern European countries, like on the eastern side of Russia, like Belarus, Latvia.
Ukraine, Azerbaijan, et cetera, et cetera.
Afghanistan, yeah.
We used to be like states. So imagine if the United States broke up and Michigan became a country.
Mhm.
Ooh.
That's basically what happened in 1991, the year after I was born.
Woo. Is there anything you would, and then so that's what you would add. Is there anything you would change?
That actually, I think I wrote that bio at some
Oh.
point. I think I had to submit that to somewhere, maybe Cliff Bell's,
For sure.
probably some years ago. Yeah.
Sweet.
So yeah, it's all true. All of that is true.
All true.
So you're originally
man.
from Belarus. Can you talk about like when you came to America and like
Yeah.
how your musical journey started and everything?
Sure. Yeah. My parents immigrated to the United States in 97. So I was 7 years old. And we lived in Brooklyn, New York first. And in '99, we made the move over to Sterling Heights, Michigan. Yeah. Sorry, was that the whole question?
Yeah, so you moved to Michigan, and then how did you kind of get into playing music and stuff?
Oh, yes, music. So actually, when we moved to Sterling Heights, Michigan, across the street directly across from where my parents stayed, I made a good friend who's my best friend for many years, and we're still very close. His name is Mike Tor, and his brothers all played instruments and stuff, and so did he. But his brothers had a little cover band. They did mostly funk covers. And I used to just hang out at his house all the time, and we would mess around with all the instruments in his basement, which included several guitars, several bass guitars, like an old organ, not like a Hammond B3, but just one of those some keyboards, a drum set. And we just used to mess around all the time, and we wanted to be just like his brothers. And we got really into playing funk, 70s, checking out a lot of 70s music. And I think from there we discovered Herbie Hancock's Headhunters project.
Ooh. Yeah.
And that was kind of the transition into jazz.
Okay.
And I guess I started out messing around more with drums and stuff, but eventually I convinced my parents to buy me an acoustic guitar, a really cheap acoustic guitar from Sam's Club.
Oh my god!
The rest is history. And me and Mike are still very close friends, and we still make music together. In fact, he plays bass on a lot of the Anti-Philosophy project.
Sweet.
Yep.
That's awesome.
It's so cool to hear. I got a guitar at Radio Shack.
You start with Herbie. You don't start with I don't know. I think I started it with Green Day was the first thing that I started with. So it's just a different. It's a different approach, I guess.
It's just so weird. Yeah. Oh man, you started with Green Day. You started with Herbie. You started with Mozart.
Yeah.
Oh man. So how about going to school and joining the Detroit scene? How was that for you? Or how did you go about it?
Yeah. Actually, my senior year in high school was a huge turning point for me because I had no plans of pursuing music professionally at that point. And my parents were not really into the idea of me playing music at all for other reasons. But what ended up happening was I convinced them to let me take just one band class in my senior year. And that was jazz band. And that was a huge turning point for me because my band director was real excited about me. And he ended up connecting me with a bunch of people. And I ended up meeting Chris Collins from Wayne State in this youth arts program.
Okay.
And which was directly hooked up through my band director at my high school. And yeah, Chris Collins offered me a scholarship. He said, come to my school and we'll give you a scholarship. And at that time, I didn't know what I wanted to go to school for or anything. So I said, okay, why not? Let's see. So I auditioned and they offered me a scholarship. And I ended up starting out at Wayne State and moving to Detroit.
Wow.
And yeah, I never finished, but that definitely led to a lot of very important connections for me during my time at Wayne State and just living in Detroit.
Yeah.
So was this the same time when Nate Wynn came into Wayne State?
Nate was in Lab 1, and I think he was a senior my first year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's how I met him then. And I'm pretty sure he didn't I met him and knew him, but I'm pretty sure I was just a random kid to him. And he was oh, cool, man. And then years later, we reconnected through the Chris Johnson.
Mm-hmm. How did you go about, because you didn't necessarily grow up in Detroit. You
kind of came in Sterling Heights.
Exactly. So how did you kind of go about getting into the Detroit music scene because you're so immersed in it now?
Yeah. Well, I started getting gigs through my connections at Wayne State. one of my first like really important gigs that actually, again, through Chris Collins, he put me in this group that he called the Generations Band. And that was like, I think maybe 2009 or so, in my second year at Wayne. And this group was performing for the Detroit Jazz Festival, like pre-conference or something like that. But anyways, in that group was Dwight Adams, Paul Keller, Nate Wynn, Gary Shunk, and Chris Collins. And I was playing guitar, and I was just like, that was like one of my first very important gigs. And yeah, all those guys were, impressed with my playing, and that led to a bunch of other situations.
Wow.
And I moved into a house in Hamtramck with some of my closest friends to this day, including Marcus Elliott, Steve Bagahole, Jake Shattuck, and Ben Ralston. And so it was just that was probably the most important time of my musical career in terms of development. Just like hanging around all those guys all the time and being able to just jam and go to sessions and ask a lot of questions. I mean, I was like, I'm pretty sure I was like one of the most annoying people on the scene back then, because I was just like trying to learn from everybody, and for a long time I felt like I was the weakest link, and I just had to like step my game up. Yeah.
Dope. It's kind of, you being in Detroit has kind of definitely, I would say, expanded your horizons now, because you've done so many things in the Detroit scene, one of which most recently is Anti-Philosophy, your collaboration with Deshaun Jones. Can you talk a little bit about that? What the message is, what the music is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Deshaun was, and his group Nomadic were some of my biggest heroes when I first came on the scene. And it was another one of those things where, probably over 10 years ago now, I was just some annoying guy who kept coming up to them after every gig and being like, man, you guys are so killing. Oh my God. And then years later, I guess I finally got good enough for Deshaun to notice me as a player. And, for a long time in his group was another guy, Conrad, you may have heard of. He ended up moving to LA, but he was like the guitarist in Nomadic. And so by the time he moved to LA was around the time that I finally got on Deshaun's kind of radar. And so he gave me an opportunity to play with the band Nomadic. The first date we did was at Cliff Bell's, I think, around the Jazz Fest time, like in 2018, I think, or 2017. And
I definitely,
you remember that?
I remember.
Yeah, that was like my first gig with them. I definitely didn't do that well, I think, but it was like a huge opportunity and challenge for me to learn that music. And just playing with Nomadic and being able to like learn their music from them directly was such a huge influence on my style and my like composition. From there, I went on to kind of make two projects that were very much influenced by Nomadic. One called Cactusaur and one called Coffee Machine / Copy Machine. Coffee Machine / Copy Machine. And I showed these projects to Deshaun the next time that we were on the road, which was we went to San Francisco.
Ooh.
Yeah, we spent a week down there playing at this club called the Black Cat. And so I got to show Deshaun this music, and he was like, yo, like, I really mess with this, man. Like, I want to collaborate with you. And that led to the start of Anti-Philosophy. And it was actually just shortly before the pandemic that I had started sending him like just some very raw files that have now become Anti-Philosophy tracks. And he very much helped me like develop them into like full and balanced compositions, because I think like a lot of what I was sending him was literally just like 35 seconds of just raw craziness, like just everything all at the same time. And he kind of stepped in like, man, this is some really good stuff, but like you need an intro, you need an interlude, you need like a solo section.
Yeah.
And he really helped me like develop that. So a lot of the Anti-Philosophy project kind of functions that way, with like just like a raw idea that I'll come up with, like a melody and a chord progression. And then he's like steps in and changes almost everything. Like he's like, okay, that kick is whack. Your bass needs to come up like at least 4 dB, like stuff like that.
Sweet. That's awesome.
That's amazing. So you play with a lot of greats. Like we mentioned Robert Glasper, we mentioned Bob Hurst, Kareem Riggins.
Yes.
Can you talk about playing with them and the things that you've learned from them? Of course, you've learned a lot from Deshaun Jones, but from playing with them as well.
Yeah. Man, where do I even start? First of all of those situations were just like, feel like just a matter of chance and luck and blessings. For example, playing with Kareem Riggins. There used to be a session at Northern Lights hosted by one of my very important mentors, Michael Jellick. And again, I used to go to that session faithfully every Wednesday for years. And I was just like super annoying to Mike Jellick, just coming up to him and asking him all these questions. And it got to the point where, I kept asking him for lessons and stuff like that. And he ended up giving me a lesson. And we kind of became friends because at the time, he like had a situation where he couldn't drive much. And I was like, man, I'll drive you to all your gigs, bro, if you just like answer some questions for me. So I was literally driving this man to every gig he had just so that I can hang around him and ask him questions. Anyways, eventually, years later, I was still going to his session, and Kareem Riggins was in town, and Mike was like going to feature him on a couple songs on this Wednesday session. And just because of the years of friendship and loyalty to each other at that point, he was like, yo, man, I want you to come up and play one of these tunes with us so that Kareem can meet you. And that's where Kareem met me, and he took my number, and he asked me if I'd be willing to just record on some beats for him. Because he's a great drummer, but he's also a huge legendary producer.
Right.
So he was just sending me, raw files to my email. And it was one of those things where it was definitely, I wasn't asking for any kind of money or anything. I was just like, man, thank you for just trusting me to put something on this.
Right.
So yeah, I ended up lacing some of his tracks, and he ended up becoming a good friend and mentor to me through that. And then Kareem put me on with pretty much all the other names that you mentioned, Robert Glasper, Common. The whole reason I ended up working with Common is because of Kareem Riggins' show. He was the headlining act in like 2017, I think, at the Detroit Jazz Festival.
Yep.
And he put together this group, which was super impromptu, which included myself and Common.
Wow.
And so that's how Common found out about me. And then Common ended up calling me to sub for his regular guitar player. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, the rest is history.
I was going to say, I remember, Common came, and I was like scanning through the Detroit Jazz Festival, the program. I'm like, why is Common, like, you just see Common's name just so small.
Right.
Under a stage. I'm like, it's Common. What are you talking about?
It was like that was the main feature of the whole jazz festival,
right?
To be honest,
yeah.
And Glasper was also on that gig.
Glasper, I can't remember who was the artist in residence for that year. It was 2017. This
Pat
was
Metheny, I think, something like that.
I think
it was before that. It was
after. Pat Metheny was. So I remember very vividly because it was my first year at Wayne.
Okay.
And I didn't know anything about like jazz. And then like the guitar teacher at Wayne, Chuck, was just like, yeah, so Pat Metheny's playing at the jazz festival, and I'm like, who's Pat Metheny? I just had no idea. Yes, exactly.
I'm trying to think. 2017 had to be.
It was 2018 because that was the gig with Forest Green. Is that the?
Yeah, Forest Green.
Yeah. I remember that so vividly because me and my friend went to watch them play, and then all of a sudden you just like walk on stage with your guitar. And I'm like, wait, is that Sasha Kashperko?
Yeah.
And we're just like, yo, this is crazy.
That was a crazy day for me, man. Yeah.
We talked about everybody at Wayne was like, dang, Sasha played with Robert Glasper and Common and Kareem Rickens.
All your days, you just go through the halls all the time like, what? You met Sasha, bro?
Yeah.
Wow.
You met Nate?
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's just like you guys are just right down the street too. But
Yeah. Just regular
you guys'
guys.
careers are wonderful and you guys are still going.
Yeah, man.
Trying.
So, if we made a musical gumbo, a Sasha Kashperko musical gumbo, what would it be made out of?
What do you mean by that?
Like, if you took, your influences that like feed your musical style and things that you want to incorporate in your music, what would that be?
Well, obviously jazz, but before I got into jazz, or before I even actually started playing instruments at all, when I was a kid in New York, my uncle, who was really more like my big brother, because he was 13 when I was born, so our age difference is not that much. So when we were living in New York, and I was like 7 or 8 or whatever, he was like still a teenager, I think, like 17 or 18 or something. And he was really into the kind of underground electronic music scene, just like going to parties like that. He wasn't a musician, but he was really into this style of music called jungle, also known as drum and bass. And that was like, that was like my first love musically. I just like, I didn't care much for, the music that my parents listened to or the popular music of the time. I was really into my uncle's music collection, which was mostly drum and bass. Mm-hmm. And my uncle, who was also like really into computer stuff, and he was always just like, at the time torrenting was really big, and like downloading music and stuff like that. So he downloaded an illegal copy of this music software called Fruity Loops. And so before I ever even touched an instrument, I was trying to make beats that sounded like drum and bass, basically. That's in Fruity Loops.
How old were you?
Fruity Loops.
10 or so.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
They're laughing at our first episode. We had Lewis Jones on the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And Lewis is just like, oh, I use Fruity Loops. And then Dom's like, Fruity Loops. It's just like, I don't know. It's like a funny thing, I guess.
So,
sorry to interrupt your story.
It's cool. So to bring things full circle, that's still what I use. It's now called FL Studio, and they have advanced a lot. I now have a legal copy, and that's where I make my beats. So I kind of like came full circle after I got into playing guitar real heavy and it became a career. I stopped touching production at all for many years. So I kind of came back around to doing that, especially once I started recording for other people. I started being like, well, let me give it a try again and see if I can make my own beats and record my own parts for them. And so now Anti-Philosophy is entirely, made in FL Studio. All of our sessions are in my FL Studio, and like all the drums I program and stuff like that.
Nice.
And just, like I said, Deshaun just helps me kind of like refine them.
Nice.
Once a lot of it is put together.
So would you say you prioritize diversifying all the elements of music or that you do? So let's say you're playing jazz, you play gospel, you play contemporary, you deal with beat making. Would you say that's a really big part of your palette?
Yeah. I definitely didn't expect myself, especially when I was first starting out and studying, at the school. I didn't have much desire really to learn R&B on the guitar or gospel, but opportunities just kind of started presenting themselves. And I think that these days, I mean, it's really hard to make a living as a small-time musician if you only really play one style.
Yeah.
Particularly if you only play traditional jazz. I mean, there's really not much work out there. And especially if you're like studying that stuff at the university. Frankly, I think that a lot of these universities are preparing students for a market that kind of doesn't exist anymore. I mean, how many big bands are there that you can audition? So why is that the main focus? That's another conversation, but
we can talk about it, man.
That's
a very important thing to talk about. It's not talked about enough.
Yeah. So I ended up kind of realizing that I have to learn other styles if I'm going to survive, because there's work. There's work in R&B, there's work in gospel, especially in Detroit. Detroit has probably some of the most gospel work of any like major music scene, I think. So yeah, it's been very important just to survive as a musician, but it's also been very important to my overall development. I mean, like, there are certain things that I never understood about jazz until I learned some gospel songs, and I was just like, wow, this is probably where that comes from, because gospel is definitely older than jazz. It's arguably older than the blues. So yeah,
It goes back to Negro spirituals, and
exactly,
and it makes up a lot of the majority of hymnals nowadays.
Yes.
And it's so cool to see, because with Detroit you had Thomas Whitfield, and if he didn't die, my dad and my brother talk about this, if he didn't die, gospel would be a little bit different nowadays. But we have the Clark sisters, the Winans, so many awesome, and when you listen to it, it's just like, I just feel like dancing right now. I feel like getting up and praising or something. So,
yeah. Man, I literally heard gospel for the first time in my life, like in 2009.
So who did you first hear?
Well, I got a gig at this church called the Greater Tree of Life. And the first gospel tunes that I heard were the ones that they asked me to learn. Which it was, I can't remember all the songs exactly, but it was like a mix of more contemporary at the time and more like traditional stuff.
Okay.
I definitely remember learning the song "He's Able" and just just being like, "Wow, man, this is some serious guitar playing."
Yeah.
Like, I was like blown away.
It's always fun watching guitar players. They're like,
oh man, that's some stuff, man. That's and all of that very much influenced the way that I play jazz and everything else. Yeah.
So Detroit has a very deep music scene. Can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on that scene? Like, what you think about it?
I think it's very underestimated, for sure. Very underrated. A lot of people talk about, all over the world, you ask people what are the major music cities. New York and LA is first, and then they might mention Chicago, they might mention Philly. And I think that Detroit needs to be right up there, right up there. One of the first places mentioned, but it's often not. So I think that proves that we're very underrated. Just Motown alone, right? Like, the Motown sound is such a huge influence on the entire world, but very seldom mentioned. So my experience has been myself realizing that, frankly, I didn't even realize that until I really got deep into it, into the scene. It's just like, man, we are important. We're very important out here. And I think the issue why it's not often mentioned is because of just the economy out here. You know, a lot of the greatest musicians from here end up having to leave just to make a living, you know? Mm-hmm. Yeah, even like guys like Jay Dilla, you know, even though he's a legend now, if you read about his story, you know, he wasn't hugely successful until he went out to LA. So I think that that's one of the problems that we need to address here. It's like, we need to make this environment better so that musicians don't feel the pressure to leave. Mm-hmm. You know, we need to be able to keep our musicians the way that LA keeps their musicians and the way that New York keeps their musicians. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we need to attract musicians here too. That's the other thing.
We hope to do that with this podcast too. We talk about this all the time. We were talking when we first started. We're like, dude, you have Fox to promote you, and that's if they so choose. Yeah. And then you have the jazz venues. If you go to Cliff Bell's, you can have your name on the front. Right. But who's like, if somebody comes into Detroit and they're like, okay, who's playing? Who are the artists here? Can I hear them? Can I, you know, get a taste of them? So we hope to fill that little gap. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's so many. There's other people doing that, but we just want to have like a
place where everything can be
a catalog,
seen, you know?
Yeah. We're like, okay, Sasha Kashperko is playing at Cliff Bell's. Who's that? He seems cool.
Yeah. Where's his
he has a podcast on MDetroit. Let me hear how he talks and you know, get a feel. So
for sure.
Awesome. How would you say Detroit has impacted your life?
Very positively. I mean, you know, I feel that I discovered my purpose. I don't think that could have happened in many other places in the world. It's certainly not where I was born in Belarus, right? Mm-hmm. I just feel very grateful and blessed to have ended up, you know, just by chance over here. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And, sorry, the cat was trying to get my coffee. It's hard to put into words how much Detroit means to me, frankly. I mean, it's everything.
You just said it right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. What is something that you want to see more of in Detroit?
Just resources, I think. Yeah. I think that we deserve more resources and more care. I just feel like we're one of the most neglected, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And not just Detroit, but Metro Detroit. Mm-hmm. I mean, and not just the music scene, but the overall, like, just Flint. What the heck is going on? Why do they still not have clean water? That's just one of many examples, you know?
Yeah. No, I just was thinking about it. It's just like, we are very neglected.
Yeah.
Very, very neglected. So how has your pandemic situation been? I know everyone has been different, but how has your situation been?
Well, I mean, there's been good and bad, I would say. I definitely, you know, missed out on some opportunities. Definitely experienced some losses, personally and in my career. But in all of that, there has been some good, I would say. One of the good things is that, well, I'll name off all the good things. There's many. One of them is that I got to work on some composition more than ever before, you know, just from having a bunch of more free time. I got to really focus on like my writing. And that's been a blessing that I didn't know I needed, because it's very much changed me as a musician and as a composer. And then I've a lot of my gigs have transitioned to being more in the church. So, because, you know, a lot of the churches were shut down, and what they ended up doing is switching over from live services to pre-recorded virtual services.
Right.
And so, whereas before I would have to basically choose the best gig that I can get on a Sunday morning, now I'm playing at 4 different churches every week because they all record on a different day and then live stream on Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
So I've gotten way better at gospel this pandemic. I've really gotten into shouting and all that kind of stuff that used to very much intimidate me. You know, now I feel more, I don't want to say I can shout now, but I feel more comfortable with it. And yeah, that's been good for me musically and financially as well. You know, church gigs pay pretty good. Church gigs usually pay much better than a club date.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not just in Detroit, but anywhere, you know. Jazz clubs paying the same wages since 1970, I'm pretty sure. So, but church gigs pay a little more than that, usually, even at a small church. And if you can get a gig at a mega church, man, you're good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Especially if you're playing at like Second Ebenezer. Do you play at a Greater Emmanuel?
I'm not at Greater Emmanuel,
Okay.
no. But I am at Second Ebenezer now.
Okay.
Yeah, which also took place this pandemic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I ended up, you know, I ended up getting a gig at a small church where Curtis Pearson was playing bass, and Curtis Pearson is one of the baddest organ players in the city. And so he was playing bass over there, and he was like, "Oh man, we need you at Second Ebenezer." And yeah, that's
amazing.
That happened this pandemic, honestly, just a few months ago.
It's crazy.
Yeah, a lot of churches are taking hits because a lot of churches have gone under.
Yeah.
For just, I don't want to get into it, but it all depends on if the congregation gives. Because if you take Triumph, man, congregation will give. Congregation gives. In some churches, congregation doesn't at times, and that's really where the income comes from, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So sorry.
No, you're fine.
Another positive thing is I got to spend a bunch of time with my wife. You know, because we're both artists, and we both just are like just used to grind constantly. You know, kind of no days off mentality. And this past year, like, our relationship has really blossomed, honestly, because we've just got to hang out all year,
Nice.
you know. And also, another positive thing is I've gotten much better about just working from home on the music front. You know, like, I upgraded my whole recording situation. I did a lot of research on recording from home and just like improved my technique overall. And thus I've gotten more work than ever before, you know, with recording at home. And it definitely, you know, all these new opportunities didn't replace my income from before. But it feels like it was kind of like something that I needed moving forward, you know, because once things do open up, I'm now much better at things that I used to neglect, you know, such as recording from home, such as being in like professional recording situations, because again, a lot of the churches are doing pre-recordings.
Right.
And I've just gotten so comfortable, you know, with like the recording equipment, with like mixing my own in-ear monitors, just things like that I never really paid much attention to before.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's so awesome. So
Awesome.
You have a very unique sound in terms of your like composition sound, and also your like guitar sound, your instrumental sound, which I think, you know, for guitar it's a little bit easier because, you know, there's so many pedals and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
And so many things, you know, and guitar, I would say guitar is like this it's like the in between of like acoustic and electric, even if it is electric. Because,
yes.
But you in particular have this very unique sound, and like you always have this like can you talk a little bit about how you craft that sound and how you use external sources to create new sounds and stuff?
Wow. Man, frankly, I didn't really get that much into pedals even until this past year, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, I've always messed around with pedals from the beginning, just because it's an electric guitar and like that's electricity is, the main thing in terms of the experimental part. But for many, many years, I just couldn't get a sound that I liked with pedals. And so I really was just one of those like straight into the amp guys for many years. So yeah, I'd say a lot of my tone and sound is just, I guess, in my fingers. However, this past pandemic, I had more time to explore that, and more time to just research, like, how do you achieve certain sounds with certain pedals. So now I've finally accumulated a nice little collection of necessary pedals, such as reverb, delay, some overdrives. And I took the time to understand what these all do. Like, for example, with guitar, there's a lot to know about distortion. And like all the different types. Like there's like true distortion, then there's like fuzz, then there's like overdrive, and combinations of those. And I finally have somewhat of an understanding of how those things work, just because of having the time to research them and mess around. And now my pedal board basically consists of 2 overdrives and reverb and delay.
Nice.
Those are basically like the essentials for most of my gigs. At home, I also like for my personal music, I also sometimes put in a whammy pedal, which I use it for 2 purposes. First purpose is shifting it down a full octave.
Which allows me to
which allows me to basically get a bass guitar sound. And so a lot of the tracks with Anti-Philosophy and also with my personal projects is me playing kind of fake bass guitar.
Yeah.
And then the other purpose for that pedal is to also go an octave up, which kind of gives me like a flute kind of synth kind of sound. But yeah, I mean, did that answer the question?
Yeah, I feel like I saw like a video of you playing with that little like drum sequencer or something.
Oh yeah, that thing, the pocket operator.
Yeah.
That's basically, I think, one of the cheapest and most user-friendly like drum machines on the market right now. It's basically just a tiny version of the MPC, which is like the classic drum machine that everybody from J Dilla and like through the 90s and 2000s used to make beats.
Yeah.
But I don't actually use it that much for my beats, my actual stuff that I've put out.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff that I've put out is entirely done in FL Studio.
Sweet.
That's wonderful. So when you're writing and / composing, how do you incorporate the different genres? Or the different genres that you love to play?
Well, I try to not think about genres specifically. Okay. I try to, but I think it's all of them are always present within me, But generally, like my process of composing, I think this differs from person to person, like kind of like what's the first step? I think that's one of the most important things when you're writing is what's your first step, right? For me, the first step is always a melody free of chords. I know a lot of people who do it the opposite way, where they start with a chord progression. But for me, my best compositions have always come from a melody. And also, I try as much as possible to have that melody come from my mind and not from my guitar playing. Because if I sit there and if I sit down with the guitar and say, okay, let's write something, it's just going to be a bunch of licks and stuff that I know. Right. It's not really truly coming from my creativity, but more so from my acquired skill set, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I try as much as possible to start with something that I'm hearing in my head, and it's always a melody. And then I figure that melody out on the guitar, record it, and then from there I add layers. The next step might be chords, And then from there, a bass line and drums and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can you talk about some lessons learned from touring?
Oh, wow. What lessons have I learned from touring? Probably many that I can't think of right now, but I definitely learned that lifestyle is as fun and exciting as it may be, there are also cons. There are pros and cons to being a touring musician. And one thing that I realized is that I need to be paid a lot of money to be like doing that full time. Because the sacrifice of just constantly being on the road, constantly being away from home, away from your loved ones is a huge sacrifice. And it's also a huge amount of time. Like, time is, the older I get, the more I realize how precious time is. And when you're on the road, you may only be working for a couple hours when you're on the stage, but all that time waiting in between, being on the plane, being on the bus, man, it's a lot. It's a lot. So for me to like accept a gig as a long-term kind of like touring gig, it has to be a pretty high-end situation, for it to be worth it.
Like Beyonce or something?
Yeah. If I was Beyonce's guitarist, that would probably cover all my bills and I wouldn't have to work. Yeah, I'd be fine with being on the road for 6 months out of the year, because then I could probably take 6 months off. But when you're touring with smaller acts, you got to come back home and get right back to the grind. And it's just like, what? You realize how much time you just gave up. How much time you could have been practicing and networking and writing your own music and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Would you bring your wife along for a big tour? That's
another thing, right? If I was Beyonce's guitarist, if I was Rihanna's guitarist, I could probably afford to, tell my wife to stop working. Just stop working. Come with me. Take a vacation.
Yeah.
That would be very much worth it. But again, like these small touring situations, I have to leave her behind, and she's just alone and working, and it's like that's definitely not good for our relationship.
Have to build some strings, some very good. What am I trying to say? Bond. There we go.
Yeah.
For a lot of people. But what is something that you would never forget that is constantly used by yourself? This could be a quote or concept or
anything.
Anything that you could possibly think of.
Oh God, I'm definitely gonna fail this. That's too deep, man.
It can be just one thing that I wake up and I always think about this before I go.
Or it could be a memory. It could be anything.
But it keeps you driving.
Man. Ooh, I don't know.
You're fine. You can take your time.
Yeah, let me think about it. I don't know.
We can come back to it.
Well, yeah. Well,
if need be.
Yes, we can. If you need to.
Man, I don't know. I guess I'll say that what I'll definitely never forget is all of the people who poured into me. Just because they believed in me, or because they're just kind people who, that's one thing that I'll never forget, is all the people who poured into me who just didn't have to. They absolutely didn't owe me anything or anybody, and they just chose to pour into me, to invest in me, to answer my questions, to give me an opportunity when they could have chosen anybody else and probably somebody better. I think that's been the most important thing throughout my life, is just like people being kind for no reason other than they're just a great person.
Yeah.
And I've experienced that over and over again in Detroit, just coming across people who are just simply kind and just want to do good for others. And they chose me, to do good. So yeah, that's one thing that keeps me going for sure.
Dope.
Like whenever I feel like I'm getting close to being on the edge of giving up, that's what I remember. It's like, no, I owe it to those people to keep going and to pour into somebody else to pay it forward.
Yeah.
You make me want to cry.
That's deep, man. That's deep.
Oh, it's so cool to hear. I always love hearing people's.
Yeah, we do that one every time, so it's just nice to like have that, very reassuring. Totally not music related, but what are some things or hobbies that you do that are not music affiliated?
Yeah. Man, I love video games. My wife would say that I'm not a gamer because she is a true gamer.
Oh.
But that's one thing that we've bonded over. We love video games.
What do you
together.
guys play?
Man, right now we're really into the Switch. We just got a Switch. We're kind of late, but we just got the Switch.
Nice.
For a while, we were just all on the PS4, but lately it's been like every Mario type of game on the Switch. We're really into Super Mario Odyssey, which is so weird but amazing.
That game is good.
Yoshi's World or something. We just got that one like this week, literally.
Dope.
Super Mario Deluxe, Super Mario 3D World, Super Mario Party. What else? She has a bunch of games that she plays without me. So my wife is actually a professional animator. That's her job. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yes.
We'll talk about it after the podcast.
Yeah. So like she's pursuing her dream of like basically becoming a video game
designer,
animator. Yeah.
That's
and
amazing.
Currently she works at Nissan, but yeah, so she's like a hardcore gamer. I mean, she really spends time playing video games. And that's one of the things that we bond over. Another thing that we bond over is that before I ever played music, I was also kind of into drawing. That's one of the things that I thought I may develop as a skill. In fact, in high school, I was like taking as many architecture classes as I could because I thought maybe I could use my skill of drawing to become an architect or something like that, or an engineer. But yeah, I don't really draw that much. And again, my wife would not even consider me a drawer because she's incredible.
Yeah.
But I still do like to draw a little bit. And and then another thing that I enjoy doing also with my wife is skateboarding.
Oh, you skate?
Yeah.
That's dope.
I used to like have a short deck and like do tricks and stuff like that. But now that I'm older and my career is something completely unrelated, we got into longboarding because it's a little more leisurely, a little less risky.
Yeah, you got the rubber wheels, so it's not like you're stuck to the ground with those.
Yeah, so me and my wife, we go out longboarding frequently.
Nice.
That's one of our activities rather than like just taking us a regular walk as people do. We're like, let's go for a skate.
Yeah.
We'll skate around the neighborhood.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
This just made me
That's
so
awesome.
happy.
I like that.
Okay. Me, Rob and I have been trying to play games. We first started playing out Skyrim. We just would do the same missions, and now we're trying to get back into gaming. I've been really busy, so I've been like, oh, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week.
Man, Skyrim is an enormous game.
I know.
Me and my wife have been working on Skyrim for like 4 years.
It's crazy.
And I don't think we've completed 20% of the game.
It's hard because you can do literally every quest, and then you can repeat those quests.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But we're trying to get into another game, so maybe we can, all four play some games,
music,
and then we can get Mark
community
into it because we've been trying to get Mark into playing with us. He'll play Smash though.
Nice.
We're very
dude. I'm
competitive.
so old school right now. I'm on the chess binge right now. I'm playing like so much chess, dude.
Wow.
I gotta calm down on.
Man, my grandpa would love you.
Oh yeah,
he was really into chess.
Yeah, I play with my grandpa. That's how him and I bond because
Nice.
he's like, let's play chess, and then like that's where I like speak Russian pretty much primarily. But
Nice.
yeah.
Yeah, I can't play chess. I barely know the rules.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not for everybody. I'm trying to like get into the games. I just don't have a gaming. I don't have anything. We have a Switch and my brother plays on it primarily, but that's not like Like they want to play like Skyrim. What's that new game that you want to play, Rob?
Valheim.
Yeah, Valheim.
Valheim.
Oh, I'm not familiar.
Oh,
I'm not a true gamer. I just really enjoy the games I enjoy.
Yeah,
it's okay. It's okay. No, Rob is like, you're so good at games. I'm just like, nah. I've just been playing for a while.
Yeah,
I love games.
Yes.
I love.
Nice.
I'll be like, oh yeah, he's over there. Yeah, we'll talk about it later. But here's kind of a new question we added because we wanted our guests to be able to say like, oh, I want him on our podcast. I want her on the podcast. I want they on the podcast. So who is somebody that you would want to see on the podcast, and what would you like us to ask them?
Oh wow, man, I'm sure a bunch of people that you guys have already considered, to be honest. But man, if you guys haven't thought about it, definitely Marcus Elliott. Marcus Elliott is one of my best friends in the world. In fact, he was the best man at our wedding.
Oh.
Turn up.
And he was also my roommate for 3 years in Hamtramck.
Amazing.
In a house very similar to this, actually. A situation very similar to this. All musicians. And man, Marcus, very similar to almost everyone I met in Detroit. He was a guy who I just looked up to so much for so many years. Like I just hoped to get good enough to be around him. And then he ended up becoming one of my best friends to this day. So I've learned a lot from him, and yeah, I think everybody can. That man is one of the most inspiring musicians, I think, on the planet. So definitely interview him if you can.
Totally.
Let's see.
What would you like to know more about him?
Yeah, what would you want to ask him? What would you want us to ask him?
Oh man, I don't know. You guys just ask him anything you can about music. Anything you can about music. His mind is so different when it comes to like, especially composition. Like for example, him and Mike Malice have this project called Balance.
Mm-hmm.
And like, man, their process for composing is just out of this world. Like they literally are inventing their own system of notation, like with symbols and like triangles and all this stuff. And like, yeah, it's just deep. Like he thinks about music on a very deep level.
That's amazing.
So ask him about his process. Yeah.
Dope.
I'm excited.
All right, we got the MDetroit staple, hip the listener. Hip. This is where we have you, the guest, hip the listeners to anything, whether it be music, art, events, movies, documentaries, whatever you want, hip the listener.
Oh, God. I'm going to sound not so hip, I think, right now. I feel like I'm starting to get out of touch, to be honest. Getting old.
Old people are hip. And you're not old.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know. I mean, shoot. I'll say this. One thing that I've noticed over the years with like the growth of social media and how much it's impacted the music scene is that a lot of people know a lot about artists and what artists are doing out in LA. But there's a lot of artists, particularly in New York, that I think get overlooked. And for me personally, a lot of my biggest influences have been more so from New York musicians than LA musicians.
Okay.
So I would just tell people to try to just check out what cats are doing in New York, because it's still very much innovative. And it's very much just inspiring. Yeah, and it's different. It's way different than almost any other place, I think. Mm-hmm. People out there are really focused on things that a lot of places are not really focused on. Like, if you check out the LA scene, you might learn a lot about recording and mixing and stuff like that, but you might not find a lot of innovation just in terms of kind of music theory. Whereas cats in New York are really focused on that. They're really focused on asking the question, what has not been done? And let's do that, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, just pay attention to New York. I feel like New York is starting to get neglected, believe it or not, in this day and age. I think that the focus is hugely on LA, but prior to social media, it was like New York and LA equally, you know? Yeah.
You know, we're bringing Detroit in that back
and
into
then,
that
bring in Detroit. We are doing a lot of innovative stuff here too.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, but I guess this message is for cats in Detroit.
Oh yeah,
because a lot of cats that I meet in Detroit don't even know a single current musician out in New York. You know what I mean?
That's wild.
Yeah.
Get hip. But here we go for our last section. This is the rapid fire questions.
Oh God.
So we're just gonna ask you some questions. You can answer as slow or fast as you want.
Can you make this happen?
And
Post-production.
well, we're just gonna ask you some stupid fast questions,
Oh,
and
God.
you can answer stupid fast or stupid slow.
Okay.
So here we go. What's
Probably
your
gonna be
favorite
slow.
context to play in?
Context?
Yes.
Like musical situation, if it's like a band, it's like a trio, like genre.
Original music, honestly. Any kind of original music. Just a situation where I feel like I'm not having to reproduce something from a record, but where I'm contributing creatively. Yeah.
Cool.
If you had a billboard anywhere in the world, where would it be and what would it say?
A billboard?
A billboard. Anywhere in the world.
Oh man. Whoa. That's deep. That
We're
may
gonna
be
get deeper.
that may be a little too difficult of a question. I don't know. Put one I don't know. I have no idea. I would make a billboard that's tall enough and large enough for everyone to see, even though that's probably not possible. And I would make it say Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, man.
Awesome. What is something that you believe that most people don't?
UFOs?
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Top 3 guitar players.
Top 3 guitar players of all time?
Of all time.
Woo, man. Oh man, definitely George Benson for me. Maybe Alfred Spanky. And I'll add in one modern guy. Just to make room for him. Kurt Rosenwinkel.
Yeah.
I was waiting for you to say it. What top 3 hip hop / R&B artists?
Oh my God. Jay Dilla.
Okay.
Kareem Riggins.
Okay.
I'm naming all producers, so man. I'll throw in. You said R&B too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dang, this is hard. It's hard for me to narrow down. Shoot. Maybe Jill Scott. Yeah, I really like her music and her singing.
Love me some Jules.
Confucius said you have 2 lives. The second one starts when you realize you only have one. When did you start your second one?
Whoa, what? Say that again?
Confucius said you have 2 lives. The second one starts when you realize you only have one life. When did you start your second life?
Oh, man. Wow. I don't know, man. Maybe around 18 years old, I would say.
Okay.
When I discovered that, my path was intertwined with music. Yeah. That was a deep awakening moment for me.
Sweet.
using an elbow voice. Tell me how you like your coffee.
I'm not very particular about my coffee.
Yes.
Man. All right. To end things off, top piece of advice to young musicians.
Woo! Oh man, that's a difficult one too. My top piece of advice to young musicians is to not take advice from older musicians too seriously, because they're preparing you for a world that no longer exists. I've gotten a lot of good advice from older musicians, but I've also received plenty of bad advice that just no longer applies. You know what I mean? Scene is constantly changing. So cats who are decades older than you are telling you about their experience decades ago. They're like, this worked for me. This is how I got here. That's probably not going to work anymore. Yeah. So be flexible and be ever learning and adapting.
Yeah.
So what is something that you are working on right now that you want people to know about?
Oh, definitely the Anti-Philosophy project.
Where can people find that?
Our first volume is currently everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So Spotify, iTunes, all those places. Volume 2 is only on Bandcamp. However, we're getting ready to put it out everywhere.
Awesome.
And the goal eventually is to get it all out on vinyl. So basically, look us up anywhere. And definitely follow us on all the main, Instagram, social, we're all on there too. So follow us and see what we're up to. We're putting out a lot of music.
Sweet.
Really fast.
Awesome.
Yeah. We're on volume 3 now, and we basically just started this past year, and we plan on doing at least 11 volumes.
That's crazy.
That's
awesome,
Turn
man.
up.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to leave with the audience?
I don't know. Just hang in there, I guess. We're living through some rough times, I think. And I think a lot of people, no matter what level you're on, have experienced great loss and great disappointment. And all I can say is if you're feeling like giving up, just don't. There's more for you. If you're still here, that means you haven't fulfilled your purpose. So keep going.
Yeah, man.
Amen. Where can people find you?
I'm on all the main social medias. I even have a TikTok now.
Oh,
I feel like such an old man on TikTok, let me tell you. But yeah, I'm everywhere. So look me up, Sasha Kashperko.
Can you spell that for the listeners?
Yes, Sasha Sasha, Kashperko Kashperko.
Woo woo. Well, we thank you so much for being on the MDetroit podcast.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. It's an honor.
It's an honor.
And we hope to collaborate soon with you.
Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you so much for listening, guys.
Check out our social media, Spotify, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast.
And also make sure to like, share, and subscribe to all of our social medias. And we'll see you later.